My son-in-law and his parents never hid their dislike for me. In their eyes, I did not belong anywhere near their social circle, and they made sure I felt it. On the way to their house that evening, I stopped to help a woman in her early 60s whose car had broken down on the shoulder of the road. Because of that, I showed up late, with grease on my hands and dust on my clothes. They treated me like trash, waving me off with open irritation and barely disguised disgust. But then the woman I had helped pulled up behind me, and the moment she spoke, everything shifted in ways none of them could have anticipated. Earlier that morning, the newspaper crackled softly as I folded it back to the sports section. Saturdays had developed a predictable cadence since I began living alone, coffee slowly cooling in a chipped navy blue mug, the quiet filling my small kitchen like a familiar companion. There was a specific kind of stillness in the apartment, the kind that settles in after years of solitude, when you stop expecting footsteps or voices to break the silence. It had been 3 years since Ellen died, yet I still placed the newspaper on the table where she used to sit, as if habit alone might summon her presence. The sharp ring of the phone sliced through the calm without warning. My hand jumped, sending a few dark droplets of coffee splattering across the obituary page. Who would be calling at 10:30 on a Saturday morning? My daughter Lauren always sent a text first, and the handful of friends I still spoke to understood my weekends were quiet by choice. "Hello," I said. "Mark." The voice on the other end was instantly recognizable, cool, controlled, and uncomfortable. My son-in-law never sounded at ease when speaking to me. "It is Stephen." I straightened in the wooden kitchen chair, its legs scraping softly against the vinyl floor. Stephen never called me directly. If he needed something, he usually passed the message through Lauren, allowing her to soften the edges. "Stephen," I replied, "is something wrong?" There was a pause, long enough that I could hear his measured breathing. "Lauren insists that I speak with you." The word "insists" carried a weight that told me this was not his idea. "My mother's birthday dinner is tonight," he continued. My stomach tightened. Caroline Reynolds' birthday. I had completely forgotten. Lauren had mentioned it weeks earlier, but life had blurred the memory. Stephen's tone made it obvious the invitation did not come from him. "I understand," I said. "She thinks you should attend." Another pause followed, longer this time. "Everyone will be there at 7, Brookfield Crest Country Club, Brookfield." Naturally, a place where the valet parking probably cost more than my weekly groceries, and the wine list was written to intimidate anyone who did not already belong. I scanned my kitchen, the mismatched plates drying in the rack, the old refrigerator humming steadily, the single coffee cup that defined my mornings now. "That is kind of Lauren," I said. "Yes," Stephen answered flatly. "Well," he pressed, impatience creeping into his voice. "Dress business casual," he added. "The club maintains standards." The way he said standards felt like a quiet jab. Not overtly cruel, but sharp enough to remind me of my position in their hierarchy. I traced my thumb along the chipped rim of my mug, feeling the rough edge beneath my skin. "I will be there," I said. "Good. 7 sharp. They do not hold tables." The line went dead before I could respond. I kept the phone against my ear for a moment, listening to the steady hum of the dial tone. Outside, a neighbor's lawnmower roared to life, sputtering and complaining in a way I understood all too well. Business casual at Brookfield Crest. I looked down at my worn college t-shirt and faded work pants. My closet had not seen a country club in years, if ever. Still, Lauren would be there. No matter how cold Stephen sounded, she had asked for me. That mattered. The coffee had gone completely cold, I set the mug aside and stood, my knees objecting to the sudden movement. 7 o'clock was not far off. I needed something respectable to wear, and I needed a gift that would not embarrass Lauren. My wallet sat on the counter beside yesterday's mail. I opened it and counted the softened bills inside. Enough for a modest present, certainly nothing that would impress the Reynolds family. But this was not about impressing them. It was about showing up for my daughter. The apartment felt smaller all of a sudden, the silence less comforting. I grabbed my keys from the hook by the door, the familiar weight grounding me. My aging Honda waited in the lot outside, dependable despite its dents and peeling paint. It had never let me down. 20 minutes later, I stood in front of my bedroom closet, water still dripping from my hair onto the towel around my shoulders. The shower had rinsed away the morning calm, but Stephen's words lingered. Business casual at Brookfield Crest. In other words, try not to make us look bad. My dress shirts hung neatly, pressed but clearly worn by time. I reached for a navy button-down, safe, understated, dark enough to hide imperfections. The fabric felt soft from years of washing. Ellen used to iron my shirts with exact precision, every crease sharp and perfect. These days, I relied on wrinkle-release spray and patience. The drive toward Northgate Plaza took about 15 minutes through light Saturday traffic, and as I pulled onto the main road, I had no idea how quickly the day was about to spiral in a direction none of us saw coming. Families filled the parking lot, piling into large sport utility vehicles, while children clutched lists for birthday parties and weekend errands. They looked like ordinary families, the kind that gathered without having to measure every word or brace for quiet judgment. I watched them for a moment, wondering what it felt like to move through life without navigating invisible social tripwires every time relatives shared a meal. Inside the mall, the weekend crowd flowed with purpose. Young parents pushed strollers past bright storefronts. Teenagers clustered near benches and phone-charging kiosks, laughing too loudly. I caught myself studying strangers, silently sorting them into categories. Those who would glide effortlessly through Brookfield Crest Country Club, and those like me, who would stand out immediately, as obvious as oil smears on fine silk. The department store's fragrance counter hit me like a wall. Dozens of competing scents filled the air, sharp enough to sting my eyes. Sales associates in crisp uniforms floated between customers who looked completely at ease, spending money I had to think twice about. They looked like people from Stephen's world. I moved deeper into the store, past glass cases of handbags, priced higher than my monthly grocery bill. "Can I help you find something?" a voice asked. A sales clerk stepped up beside me, her smile practiced but sincere. She looked to be in her mid-40s, wedding ring catching the overhead lights, someone who clearly understood what it meant to earn a paycheck. "I need a birthday gift for my son-in-law's mother," I said. Her expression shifted just slightly, the way people do when they hear more than the words alone. "What kind of relationship do you have with her?" I let out a small breath. "That is a fair question. Complicated." She nodded, clearly understanding more than I had explained. "And your budget?" "Between $50 and $75. Come with me." She led me toward a display of scarves and modest jewelry, items that were tasteful without being personal, appropriate without being cheap, the kind of gifts meant to avoid offense. She reached into a case and lifted out a silver picture frame, simple and understated. "This one works well," she said. "It shows effort without crossing any lines." I turned the frame over in my hands, feeling its solid weight. It was elegant without being flashy. The tag read $68, more than I usually spent, but this was not a usual situation. A memory surfaced without warning. 3 years earlier, the first time I met Caroline and Harold Reynolds, Lauren had insisted on dinner at an upscale Italian restaurant. White tablecloths, soft lighting, servers in pressed black vests. I had worn my best shirt, the one Ellen had picked out years earlier for church holidays and special occasions. I still remembered the look on Caroline's face when Lauren introduced me. A brief flicker of confusion, followed by careful adjustment when she realized her daughter-in-law's father worked with his hands for a living. Harold's handshake had been quick and distracted, his attention already drifting to safer, more familiar topics. "Dad is great with his hands," Lauren had said, trying to bridge the gap. "He can fix just about anything." "How, practical," Caroline had replied. The pause before the word said everything. "Sir?" the sales clerk said gently, pulling me back to the present. "The frame." "I will take it," I said. She wrapped it carefully in soft tissue paper and placed it inside a small gift bag with ribbon handles. It looked far more polished than the money I had used to buy it. At the register, I counted out the bills slowly, the exchange feeling heavier than it should have. As I walked back through the mall, storefront windows reflected my image: clean shirt, pressed pants, gift bag in hand. A man dressing up for people who had already decided he did not belong. I reminded myself again that this was not about them. It was about Lauren, about showing up when your family needed you, even when they did not make it easy. My old Honda started on the second try, the engine settling into its familiar, dependable hum. I placed the gift bag carefully on the passenger seat and checked the dashboard clock. 12:40. Plenty of time to head home, grab a jacket, and leave for Fairview Heights with a small cushion. The afternoon stretched ahead of me, uncertain and heavy. A long drive meant plenty of time to think, and I was not sure that was a good thing. Stephen's clipped invitation echoed in my mind. Underneath it, I heard Lauren's voice from that first dinner, trying so hard to connect two worlds that clearly had no interest in meeting halfway. I pulled out of the parking lot and headed home, the gift bag rustling softly with each turn. In less than an hour, I would be on the highway, carrying a $68 peace offering toward a birthday celebration where peace felt unlikely. Still, sometimes showing up was all you could do. Interstate 74 stretched ahead like a gray ribbon, cutting through open farmland under an afternoon sun that cast everything in warm gold. I had been driving for about an hour, cruise control set at 68, classic rock playing quietly on the radio. The gift bag sat upright, secured by the seatbelt like a fragile passenger. Traffic moved smoothly, the typical Saturday flow of families heading toward dinners and obligations. I glanced at the clock, 2 o'clock exactly. If I stayed on schedule, I would arrive around 4:30, maybe even a few minutes early. That was when I saw it. A silver Mercedes sat on the shoulder ahead, hazard lights flashing steadily against the pavement. An expensive car, completely still. My instincts kicked in before I had time to think. Years of fixing engines and diagnosing problems took over automatically as I eased off the accelerator and focused on the scene unfolding ahead. Someone clearly needed help. I eased off the cruise control and guided my Toyota onto the shoulder behind the luxury sedan. A woman stood beside the open hood, her silver hair catching the sunlight. She wore a tailored navy blazer that probably cost more than my entire monthly pension check. She looked to be in her early 60s, composed and dignified, but it was obvious she was far outside her comfort zone. As I stepped out of my car, the rush of traffic roared past us, wind tugging at my clothes. She watched me approach with the kind of careful scrutiny people use when a stranger offers help in a vulnerable place. "Having car trouble?" I called out, keeping my distance so I did not seem threatening. "Yes," she replied. The engine just shut down. Her voice was polished, every word crisp, the kind of speech shaped by good schools and refined company. I recognized it instantly. Every warning light on her dashboard must have come on at once. I walked a little closer, keeping my hands visible and my posture relaxed. "My name is Mark. I used to work on cars for a living. Would you mind if I take a look?" She hesitated, clearly weighing her options. A woman alone on the side of the highway had every reason to be cautious. "I'm Victoria Hale," she said finally, extending her hand in a firm, businesslike gesture. "I would appreciate any insight you can offer." Her handshake was confident, practiced, the grip of someone used to negotiating contracts in boardrooms. But right now, she was just another stranded driver. "What happened right before it died?" I asked. "There was a strange noise under the hood," she said. "Almost a grinding sound. Then the temperature gauge spiked, and everything went quiet." I nodded. The picture was already coming together. "That sounds like a failed water pump. When those go, they usually take the serpentine belt with them." Her expression shifted from concern to cautious hope. "Is that something you can fix here?" "That depends on what else got damaged," I replied. "Do you mind if I grab some tools from my car?" She stepped aside and gestured toward the engine compartment. "Please." My emergency toolkit lived permanently in my trunk. Basic wrenches, pliers, tape, jumper cables. 40 years of turning wrenches had taught me to be prepared. You never knew when someone would need help. When I returned, I caught Victoria glancing at my Toyota with open curiosity. A 10-year-old economy car sitting behind a brand-new luxury sedan. The contrast was not lost on either of us. "Let's see what we're dealing with," I said, leaning over the engine bay. European engineering stared back at me. Overcomplicated where American cars stayed straightforward. Expensive where domestic vehicles favored simplicity. Still, an engine told its story if you knew how to listen. A shredded belt hung loose. Coolant was splashed across the components. The water pump pulley wobbled dangerously on its shaft. I straightened up. Good news and bad news. She looked at me expectantly. "The good news is I can probably get you moving again. The bad news is it will take a while." She checked her watch, a slim gold piece flashing in the sunlight. "How long are we talking?" "An hour and a half, maybe 2, assuming I can rig a temporary solution." Her shoulders sagged slightly. "I am guessing you had somewhere important to be." "You are not alone," I said. "The other option is calling a tow truck and waiting until Monday for parts. It is your call." She glanced down the long stretch of highway, then back at me. Whatever calculation she made, it did not take long. "If you are willing to try, I would be very grateful." "I can do that," I said. "Just stay clear of the traffic side. This is going to get messy." I rolled up my sleeves and leaned into the engine bay. Grease and coolant quickly coated my hands. The water pump would need a full replacement eventually, but roadside repairs were about getting home, not perfection. Victoria stood back near the guardrail, watching as I loosened the damaged belt and examined the housing. It was barely workable, but workable nonetheless. The kind of repair that separated true mechanics from people who only replaced parts. "You are giving up your Saturday afternoon for this," she observed. "I had plans too," I said, wrestling with a stubborn bolt. "But cars do not care about schedules." "Where were you headed?" "Family dinner," I replied. "A birthday celebration. No need to explain the tension or the reluctant invitation. I hope I am not making you late," she said. "We will see," I answered as the bolt finally broke free with a metallic snap. "What about you?" "Same thing," she said quietly. "A birthday gathering." The coincidence made me pause for half a second. Small world. I went back to work, letting the familiar rhythm take over, diagnose the problem, remove what was broken, improvise with what I had, make it last long enough to get home. The same method that had carried me through 4 decades of other people's emergencies. Time slipped the way it always did when I worked. Cars rushed past. The sun edged westward. My hands moved through German engineering on instinct alone. About 40 minutes in, sweat gathered under my collar despite the cool spring breeze. When the alternator housing finally came free, the real culprit revealed itself. Worn brushes and a seized bearing that had finally surrendered. "How long have you been doing this?" Victoria asked from her spot near the guardrail. "I started when I was 16, I said, wiping my hands on an old rag as I examined the damage. 46 years, give or take." "That is impressive," she said. "Most people our age are slowing down." I looked up at her then, catching an expression I had not expected. Respect, mixed with something deeper. Her curiosity was different from what I was used to. It was not the faintly judgmental interest I had learned to expect from Stephen's family, but something genuine. They are not condescending, I thought. She actually wanted to understand. "Cars keep me grounded," I said, breaking the quiet. "They do not care who you are. You either fix them correctly, or they leave you stranded." "Like mine just did," Victoria said lightly. "Exactly." I set the damaged alternator carefully on the fender and reached into my emergency kit for a replacement. "Good thing I am old-fashioned about carrying backup parts," I added. She stepped closer, watching my hands with interest instead of impatience. "You just happen to travel with spare alternators." "This one is rebuilt," I explained. "I picked it up from a salvage yard last month and cleaned it up during slow evenings. You never know when something like this will come in handy." She smiled faintly. "Most people would just call roadside assistance." "Most people do not know how to fix what breaks," I said as I lined up the replacement unit and checked the mounting points. These days, everyone wants things done for them, instead of learning how to do them themselves. "There is something admirable about self-reliance," she said, settling back against the guardrail. Despite the ticking clock, she did not seem rushed. "My late husband used to say the same thing. Different industry, same philosophy." The past tense caught my attention, along with the subtle change in her voice. "I am sorry for your loss," I said. "Thank you," she replied. "It has been 5 years, but some days it still feels recent." As I worked the alternator into place, I understood that feeling all too well. "I lost my wife 3 years ago," I said quietly. "Cancer." "I am sorry," she said, and there was no forced politeness in her tone, just sincerity. "It changes everything, does it not?" "It changes how you spend your time," I replied, tightening a bolt as the threads caught cleanly. "Makes you think harder about what actually matters." A semi-truck roared past, the blast of wind and noise briefly swallowing our conversation. When it faded, I noticed Victoria watching me with focused attention, not casual curiosity. "You make it look effortless," she said. 46 years of repetition," I replied. I guided the belt around the pulley and checked the tension with practiced fingers. "Same as anything else. Start with what you understand, figure out what you do not, and keep your hands moving while your mind solves the rest." That is surprisingly philosophical for engine work. I chuckled, realizing how relaxed I felt despite the time pressure. "My wife used to say I overthought simple things. Maybe she was right, or maybe thinking about simple things is how we stay balanced." Her expression suggested she understood exactly what I meant. When I glanced up, I noticed the stress lines around her eyes, lines shaped by responsibility and decisions that affected more than just herself. Whatever gathering she was headed toward carried more weight than a casual celebration. "Your event tonight," I said. "Family?" "Mostly business associates," she answered, though sometimes the difference is hard to tell. She glanced at her watch, still calm. "And yours?" "Family," I said, "my daughter's in-laws." I kept my voice even, glossing over the complexity those words carried. It is not exactly my environment, but you show up when your family asks. "Even when it is uncomfortable?" she asked, "especially then." She nodded slowly, as if that answer resonated deeply. The connection between us felt natural. Two people used to relationships that demanded more patience than reward. I returned my focus to the alternator, tightening the final connections. The repair was nearly done, yet I found myself moving more deliberately than necessary. It had been a long time since I spoke with someone who listened instead of simply waiting for their turn. "Almost finished," I said at last, though part of me regretted the end of our unexpected partnership. "You have been incredibly generous," Victoria said. "I know this must have made you late." "Sometimes being late is worth it." I gave the belt one last check and nodded, satisfied, ready to see if it works. She straightened, anticipation and nerves crossing her face. "Ready." I climbed into the driver's seat of the Mercedes, gripping the key. The afternoon had taken a turn I never expected. What began as an obligation-filled day had become something unexpectedly meaningful, a reminder that decent people still existed, often where you least expected them. I turned the key. The engine fired instantly, smooth and steady. The dashboard lights settled into calm greens, every warning extinguished. I gently revved the engine, listening to the alternator's quiet, even hum. "Perfect," I said. "That sounds completely different," Victoria observed, leaning closer to the open hood. "It should last you another 100,000 miles at least," I replied as I stepped out. "Just check your belt tension every few months." She reached into the car and pulled out her purse, opening a leather wallet. "What do I owe you?" "Nothing," I said. She looked genuinely confused. "I am sorry." "You do not owe me anything." I began packing my tools, placing each wrench back where it belonged. I was glad to help. "Mark, you cannot be serious," she said. "You gave up your entire afternoon, used your own tools, your own alternator." "Sometimes people just need help," I replied. She stood there holding her wallet, clearly torn. "At least let me reimburse you for the part." $15 from a junkyard," I said. "I have more than I will ever need." I snapped the toolbox shut and met her eyes. "Besides," I added, "what goes around eventually comes back around." "Someone helped me once when I really needed it," I said quietly. "This does not feel wrong. Trust me." She hesitated, then slowly slipped her wallet back into her purse, though her expression made it clear the conversation was not over. "Then at least give me your phone number," Victoria said. "I would like to stay in touch." That caught me off guard, more than I expected. "You are sure about that?" I asked. "Absolutely," she replied without hesitation. "You do not meet genuinely decent people very often." I pulled my phone from my back pocket. It was an older model, nothing fancy, but it made calls and sent texts, which was all I ever needed. "What is your number?" I asked. She recited it carefully while I typed it in. Then I called her immediately, so she would have mine as well. Her phone rang, with a classical tune I did not recognize. Something refined and understated. "Victoria Hale," I said, saving the contact. "All right." You are officially in my phone. And you are in mine, she replied with a smile. The first fully relaxed smile I had seen from her all afternoon. Mark Turner, she said playfully. Highway guardian angel. Just Mark is fine, I said, smiling back. We stood there for a moment, both aware that our unexpected partnership was coming to an end. 2 hours on the side of the highway had created something neither of us anticipated, a real connection built on shared conversation and quiet respect. I hate to rush off, Victoria said, checking her watch, but I really need to get moving. I am already very late. The word late hit me like a splash of cold water. My carefully planned schedule was completely gone. Yeah, I said, forcing a casual tone. Me too. She paused, then asked, if you do not mind me asking, where are you headed? The Brookfield area, I replied. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Really? Same direction. My chest tightened for just a second. Brookfield again. Ohio had plenty of traffic heading that way on a Saturday evening, but the coincidence still landed oddly. Small world, I said. Maybe we will see each other on the road, she replied. She extended her hand, and I took it. Her grip was firm and warm, lingering just a fraction longer than a polite handshake usually did. Thank you does not even begin to cover what you did today, she said. Take care of yourself, Victoria. You too, Mark, she said, and I meant it about staying in touch. I watched her get back into the driver's seat, adjusting the mirrors and checking the dashboard like someone who had genuinely been shaken by mechanical failure. The Mercedes started smoothly, purring with quiet confidence. I returned to my own car and reached for the gift bag sitting on the passenger seat. The silver picture frame was still inside, though the ribbon handles had wilted in the afternoon heat. At least I would not arrive empty-handed, even if I was painfully late. Victoria rolled down her window before pulling out. Drive safely, she called. You too, I replied, and call me if you ever have more car trouble. I will, she said, and Mark, thank you for everything. She merged into traffic, her car blending easily into the westbound flow toward Brookfield. I waited a moment, watching her taillights disappear. My phone buzzed. A text from Victoria appeared on the screen. Your kindness restored my faith in people. Thank you. I typed back quickly. Glad I could help. Safe travels. As I started my engine and eased onto the highway, a strange mix of satisfaction and anxiety settled in my chest. The afternoon had shifted from obligation to something unexpectedly meaningful. Victoria Hale, a stranger just 2 hours earlier, was now someone I genuinely hoped to see again. Then reality returned. The Reynolds birthday dinner loomed ahead, and I was no longer just late. I was catastrophically late. Stephen's cold voice echoed in my memory as I followed the same route Victoria had taken minutes before. An hour later, I turned into the Brookfield Crest subdivision. Every lawn looked professionally sculpted. Every driveway displayed vehicles that cost more than most people earned in a year. The Reynolds home sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, like a monument to success. 2-story brick, wide bay windows, landscaping straight out of a magazine. I parked my Toyota behind a line of luxury cars, BMW, Mercedes, Lexus, Audi. My aging sedan looked like it had wandered into the wrong neighborhood by accident. The gift bag rested on the seat beside me. The ribbon was completely limp now. The silver frame inside suddenly felt painfully modest. As I walked up the curved driveway, I caught my reflection in the glossy side of a parked car. 2 hours of roadside repairs had left evidence behind. Grease smudges on my shirt, dirt under my fingernails despite a hurried cleanup, hair pushed out of place by highway wind. Not exactly business casual by Brookfield Crest standards. The doorbell chimed with soft classical notes that probably cost more than my monthly utility bill. Through the glass panels, I could see movement, hear laughter, the clink of glasses. The party had been going on just fine without me. Caroline Reynolds opened the door herself. Her expression shifted rapidly, surprise, evaluation, then barely concealed dismay. Her eyes traveled over me, lingering on the stains, the worn clothes, the gift bag. "Mark," she said. It was not a greeting. It sounded more like confirming an unwelcome diagnosis. "Mrs. Reynolds, I am sorry I am late. Happy birthday." I held out the gift bag. She accepted it, using only her fingertips, as if she were worried the paper itself might stain her skin. "I would say you are more than late," she replied coolly. "Nearly 2.5 hours, in fact. May I ask why?" "I had to stop and help someone whose car broke down." "I see." Her tone suggested she saw plenty, and none of it impressed her. She turned her head slightly toward the living room. "Stephen," she called out, pausing just long enough before the next word to make it sting, "your guest has arrived." That deliberate hesitation before guest carried enough frost to freeze the air. She stepped aside, allowing me into the foyer with obvious reluctance. The inside of the house matched the outside perfectly. Polished marble floors stretched beneath my feet. A crystal chandelier glittered overhead. Framed artwork lined the walls, each piece likely worth more than my car. Stephen appeared from the living room holding a glass of red wine, his tie perfectly straight, his hair untouched by wind or effort. His eyes swept over me, registering the grease marks and wrinkled shirt. "There you are," he said. He somehow managed to make the words sound like an accusation. We were starting to wonder if something had happened. "Something did happen," I replied evenly. "Someone needed help." "Right." He took a slow sip of wine, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to take my side. "Well, you made it." Lauren stepped out from the kitchen then. She looked beautiful in a navy dress that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Her face brightened when she saw me, then faltered as she noticed my condition. "Dad, I was so worried," she said, pulling me into a hug despite the grease and dust. Her warmth stood in sharp contrast to the icy reception around us. "Are you okay?" "I am fine," I said softly. "Just got a little dirty helping someone whose car broke down." Caroline's expression tightened, as if the idea of getting dirty was something respectable people simply avoided. "Perhaps you would like to freshen up," she began. "The powder room is—" "He is fine, exactly as he is." Harold Reynolds's voice cut sharply through the foyer as he joined us. Where his wife favored icy disdain, Harold preferred blunt force. "There is no point pretending this is anything other than what it is," he continued. Lauren's cheeks flushed. "Harold, please." "Please what?" he snapped. "Please welcome him when he shows up looking like he just crawled out from under an engine, while we are entertaining actual business associates." The emphasis on actual landed like a physical blow. I felt the warmth I had carried from helping Victoria drain out of me, replaced by a familiar heaviness. "It was just car trouble," Lauren said quietly. "Dad was helping someone." "Of course he was," Caroline said, smiling thinly. "How very on brand." Stephen cleared his throat, shifting his weight, clearly uncomfortable, but still silent. "Maybe we should all just—" "Just what?" Harold interrupted. His voice carried the authority of a man used to being obeyed. "Pretend this is normal, that showing up to a birthday dinner dressed like a mechanic is acceptable." I opened my mouth to answer, but Lauren stepped in front of me. I could see the conflict tearing at her. her loyalty to me battling her need to keep peace in her marriage. "He did not plan on fixing a car today," she said, her voice tight. "Things happen. Things," Caroline repeated coolly, "happen to certain kinds of people." The words hung in the air like smoke after a fire, impossible to ignore, impossible to take back. We moved toward the living room, and it felt like crossing into hostile territory. Conversations stopped as we passed. Heads turned, eyes lingered. Crystal glasses sparkled under the lights. Silver trays held elegant appetizers. Every guest wore clothing that probably cost more than my monthly pension. I stood out immediately. I felt like an exhibit placed in the center of the room. My grease-stained shirt and scuffed jeans framed by marble tables and imported furniture. The birthday cake sat proudly on the dining table, 3 flawless tiers crafted by a professional bakery. My $68 silver picture frame suddenly felt embarrassingly small. "Well," Caroline announced loudly, her voice carefully projected for the entire room, "now that Mark has finally decided to join us, perhaps we can begin." Her words carried enough venom to sour the air. Several guests shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension but unwilling to intervene. I moved toward an empty chair, intending to sit quietly and disappear into the background. "Oh no," Caroline said sharply. "I do not think so." The room went completely still. At least 20 pairs of eyes turned toward us. "If you cannot dress like a civilized adult," she continued, raising her voice so no one could miss a word, "then you should not sit at the table with civilized adults." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the soft jazz playing in the background seemed to falter. Lauren's face drained of color. Her hand flew to her throat. "Mom, Caroline, that is my father," she said, her voice cracking. "Your father," Stephen added calmly, with calculated cruelty, who apparently believes birthday dinners are appropriate venues to showcase his work clothes. Heat surged in my chest. The quiet confidence I had felt earlier, earned honestly on the side of the highway, now collided with years of stored humiliation. Around us, guests pretended to focus on their drinks, while straining to catch every word, waiting to see what I would do next. "Either you change into something presentable," Harold said, his voice carrying the unquestioned authority of a man used to being obeyed, "or you leave. We cannot allow this kind of display at our celebration." The hesitation before the word display landed like a punch to the chest. I looked around the room. Faces reflected a mix of discomfort and curiosity. These were not monsters, just people witnessing a public humiliation they did not want to be part of, yet lacked the courage to stop. Polite silence can be just as cruel as open hostility. Lauren stepped directly in front of me, her hands slightly trembling. "Please do not do this," she said. "He stopped to help someone whose car broke down. That is who he is. He helps people." "Which is precisely the problem," Caroline replied smoothly, her smile sharp enough to draw blood. "Some people simply do not understand appropriate boundaries." In my mind, I saw Victoria on the shoulder of the highway, stranded, grateful, relieved when a stranger stopped. I remembered her sincere thanks, her respect for honest work. The contrast was brutal. She had appreciated me for getting dirty to help her. These people wanted to punish me for the exact same thing. "You know what?" I said quietly. The room leaned in without realizing it. "You are absolutely right." Lauren's eyes widened in alarm. "Dad, no." "Some people truly do not understand boundaries," I continued calmly. I met Caroline's eyes, then Stephen's, then Harold's. "Some people believe money makes them better than other human beings." A ripple of tension spread through the room. Guests shifted uncomfortably. What had been social discomfort was now something darker. And some people, I added, my voice steady, even as anger burned beneath it. Forget that character is not something you can buy. Caroline's face flushed a deep angry red. How dare you speak to us like that? I dare, I replied, reaching into my pocket and pulling out my keys, because someone should tell you the truth at least once. I closed my hand around the keys. You want me gone? Fine. But remember this moment the next time you wonder why decent people keep their distance from you. Lauren stepped toward me, tears gathering in her eyes. Dad, please do not go. It is exactly what it looks like, sweetheart, I said gently, resting a hand on her shoulder. And you deserve better than this. I turned toward the foyer, my dignity intact, despite their best efforts to strip it away. Behind me, Caroline's voice rose in offended outrage. Stephen muttered something about predictable behavior. I heard Lauren begin to cry, softly. Then the doorbell rang. The classical chime echoed through the house, cutting through the hostility like music from another world. Through the glass panels, I caught sight of silver paint and unmistakably elegant lines. My breath caught. A Mercedes sat in the driveway, the same luxury sedan I had spent 2 hours repairing on the side of the highway. Car doors closed outside with that solid, expensive sound that spoke of precision engineering. Confident footsteps followed, heels clicking against the stone walkway. Victoria Hale appeared beyond the glass, composed and radiant. Her silver hair was perfectly styled. Her navy blazer was immaculate. She carried herself with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being listened to. Stephen moved instinctively toward the door, his wineglass trembling slightly in his hand. That must be, he began. The investor, Harold finished for him, sudden panic tightening his voice. Understanding hit me hard. Victoria, the birthday celebration, the same gathering she had mentioned on the highway. Of course. Caroline's face drained of color. Her eyes darted between me and the woman approaching the door. She is early, Caroline whispered. We were not expecting. The door opened before Stephen could reach it. Victoria stepped inside with effortless confidence, her eyes sweeping the elegant foyer before settling on the cluster of people in the living room. Then she saw me. Her entire face brightened with unmistakable warmth. Mark, she said clearly, her voice carrying across the room. What a wonderful surprise to see you here. She walked toward me with the ease of someone genuinely happy to see an old friend. The Reynolds family froze. Their expressions scrambled to keep up as they tried to make sense of what they were witnessing. Victoria, I said, smiling for the first time in hours. Small world. Is it ever? She replied warmly. How did the rest of your drive go? I hope you were not too late for your family gathering. Behind her, I watched Caroline's face cycle through confusion, recognition, and dawning horror. Stephen's wineglass hung motionless halfway to his mouth. Harold looked like someone had just informed him that his business licenses had been revoked. My family gathering? I repeated. Well, this is it. Victoria lifted her eyebrows in pleasant surprise. Really? How delightful. What are the odds? She turned to include the Reynolds family in her smile. I watched them struggle, torn between their instinctive disdain for me and their sudden desperation to impress her. Ms. Hale, Harold managed, forcing cheer into his voice. Welcome to our home. We are deeply honored to have you here to celebrate Caroline's birthday. The pleasure is mine, Victoria replied graciously, but I noticed the slight pause as her eyes took in the rigid postures, The strained smiles, the tension hanging thick in the air. Something she clearly realized was very wrong. "I certainly hope I am not interrupting anything important," Victoria said pleasantly. Caroline stepped forward at once. The speed of her transformation, from icy disdain to eager hospitality, was so abrupt, it would have been amusing under different circumstances. "Not at all," she said quickly. "We were simply welcoming Mark to the celebration." "How lovely," Victoria replied. Her smile stayed perfectly composed, but her eyes sharpened just enough to notice. "Mark was an absolute lifesaver this afternoon. My car broke down on the highway, and he spent hours getting me safely back on the road. He even refused to accept payment. Can you imagine that?" The silence that followed was heavy and unmistakable. Every head in the room turned, eyes moving back and forth between Victoria and me. Guests and family alike struggled to process what they had just heard. Lauren's face brightened with sudden hope, while her husband's family looked as though they were watching a slow-motion disaster unfold. "Ours?" Stephen asked, his voice cracking slightly. "At least 2, Victoria said cheerfully. "I was completely stranded until Mark stopped. Such kindness from a total stranger. You do not see that very often anymore." Harold cleared his throat, his instincts as a businessman warring with rising panic. "Yes, well, Mark is very helpful." The word helpful sounded like a reluctant confession. Victoria tilted her head slightly, her social awareness clearly picking up the strain in the room. "Is everything all right?" she asked calmly. "There seems to be quite a bit of tension." "Well," Stephen said, stepping forward, his wineglass trembling, "we were just discussing appropriate attire for the evening." "Attire?" Victoria echoed, her brows lifted slightly. "You mean the clothes Mark is wearing?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Every guest stopped pretending not to listen. Conversations died completely as this elegant woman openly questioned her hosts. "The clothes he wore while repairing my car on the highway," Victoria continued, her voice now carrying a quiet authority that demanded attention. "The clothes that became dirty because he spent 2 hours helping someone in need." Harold cleared his throat again. "Mrs. Hale, you must understand, we maintain certain standards." "Standards," Victoria repeated, as if tasting something sour. "What exactly did you say to Mark about his appearance?" The silence stretched painfully. Lauren moved closer to me, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment as her in-law's behavior was laid bare in front of someone who clearly mattered to them. "Nothing inappropriate," Caroline said at last, though the venom had drained from her voice. "We simply suggested he might feel more comfortable elsewhere." "What did you say?" Victoria asked, her tone precise and unyielding. I felt the urge to defuse the moment. "It is all right, Victoria. Really. I was about to leave anyway." "No," she said firmly, turning to me. "It is not all right. What exactly did they say to you?" Before I could answer, Stephen's shaking hand betrayed him. His wineglass slipped, shattering against the marble floor. Red wine spread across the white stone like a dark stain of shame. "They said I could not sit at the table with human beings," I said quietly. The words fell like a verdict. Several guests gasped. Victoria's expression did not change, but her posture did. She straightened, suddenly commanding the room without raising her voice. "I see," she said coolly. "And this is how you treat a man who spent his afternoon helping others. This is your definition of appropriate conduct." "Mrs. Hale, please," Harold pleaded. "You must understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," Victoria replied, stepping to my side. Her presence felt like armor. I understand that Mark sacrificed his afternoon, arrived late because of his kindness, and was told he was unfit to sit with human beings. Caroline's face had gone pale. We did not mean. You meant exactly what you said. Victoria interrupted, her tone sharp enough to cut stone. Now let me be perfectly clear about what I mean. She turned slowly, ensuring every guest could hear her. Either Mark sits at this table with the respect and dignity he deserves, she said evenly, or I walk out that door immediately. The silence that followed was absolute. 20 pairs of eyes watched as the most elegant woman in the room delivered an ultimatum to her hosts. Harold's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. You do not understand, Stephen whispered. Our reputation, our standing. Your standing? Victoria let out a short, humorless laugh. Your standing is determined by how you treat people when you believe no one important is watching. And I have been watching. She addressed the room at large. I have seen more character in this man's little finger than in this entire household combined. Anyone who disagrees is welcome to leave with the hosts. Not a single guest moved. Lauren stepped forward, tears in her eyes. Mrs. Hale, I am so sorry. This is not how I wanted this evening to be. The apology should come from your husband's family. Victoria said gently to her, You are not responsible for their choices. Harold and Caroline exchanged desperate looks. The birthday celebration had turned into a public reckoning, with their most valuable guest now judge and jury. Of course, Mark is welcome at our table, Harold said finally, his voice hollow with defeat. We were only concerned about his comfort. How considerate, Victoria replied dryly. Then let us proceed to dinner. She turned to me and smiled. Mark, she said, extending her arm, would you do me the honor of sitting beside me? And just like that, the power in the room changed hands. I looked at her, this woman who had appeared at exactly the right moment, turning humiliation into something else entirely through nothing more than composure, clarity, and unshakable dignity. I would be honored, I said. 20 minutes later, we were seated around the Reynolds family's massive mahogany dining table, an uneasy arrangement held together by forced smiles and strained politeness. Lauren had positioned herself where she could watch everyone closely, her posture alert and protective. I found myself placed in what was unmistakably the seat of honor, directly beside Victoria, a position I never would have imagined occupying in this house. Dinner unfolded with painful formality. Caroline carved the birthday roast with surgical precision, her movements stiff and controlled. Stephen poured wine with hands that still trembled despite his attempts at calm. Lauren tried to fill the silence with small talk about the weather and neighborhood events, her voice doing its best to sound normal. Harold, on the other hand, could not stop talking. We are truly delighted you could join us this evening, Miss Hale, he said, for the third time, while hacking unnecessarily at his steak. Your reputation in the investment community precedes you, of course. Victoria lifted one eyebrow slightly. Does it? Oh, absolutely, Harold said quickly, when we heard you were considering our proposal. Well, his voice trailed off as the realization hit him. The silence that followed was crushing. Forks froze mid-air. Glasses hovered inches from lips. Harold's face drained of color, turning the same deep red as the wine stain still visible on the foyer floor. Your proposal? Victoria asked calmly, though I could hear the sharp intelligence behind the question. Well, I mean, Harold scrambled, words tumbling over one another. The expansion opportunity for Reynolds Construction, the commercial development proposal we submitted to your firm last month. Understanding slammed into me. Victoria was not simply an elegant guest. She was their potential investor, the person who could determine the future of Harold's business, the woman whose approval they desperately needed, and they had spent the evening humiliating the man who had helped her. "I see," Victoria said, setting her fork down with deliberate care. "Yes, I do review opportunities through my venture capital firm, although I must say tonight has been educational." Stephen's wineglass stopped moving entirely. "Educational?" he repeated weakly. "Very much so," Victoria replied. "You see, my investment decisions are not based solely on projections, spreadsheets, or market trends." Her voice carried the quiet authority of someone used to boardrooms and high-stakes decisions. "Character matters. Integrity matters. How people treat others when they believe no one important is watching. That matters more than most people realize." Harold's face shifted from red to a sickly gray. "Miss Hale," he began urgently, "if there has been any misunderstanding—" "Oh, there has been no misunderstanding at all," Victoria said, her smile devoid of warmth. "I understand perfectly. You needed my investment, invited me to your home, and then spent the evening showing me exactly who you are." Caroline finally spoke. "We were only maintaining appropriate standards." "Standards?" Victoria repeated, letting out a short, humorless laugh. "You told a man who spent his afternoon helping a stranger that he was not fit to sit with human beings. Is that your standard?" The room felt unsteady as the full scope of the situation settled in. The people who had insulted me, dismissed me, and tried to exclude me were now dependent on the goodwill of the woman I had helped on the side of the highway. The symmetry of it was almost unreal. "The irony here is remarkable," Victoria continued, her gaze circling the table. "The man you deemed unworthy of your company is the very reason I arrived here safely tonight." Harold's knife slipped from his hand, clattering loudly against his plate. "We did not know," he said weakly. "Exactly," Victoria replied. "You did not know. You judged Mark based on his appearance, his profession, and his perceived status. You never paused to consider his competence, his generosity, or his character." She took a measured sip of wine. "In my experience, those qualities tell you far more about a person's worth than the cost of their clothing." Lauren's eyes filled with tears. "Ms. Hale," she said quietly, "my father is a good man, the best man I know." "I can see that," Victoria said gently, her tone softening only for her. "It is obvious to anyone willing to look. The real question is whether your husband's family is capable of seeing it." The birthday cake sat untouched on its crystal stand. 3 flawless tiers no one seemed interested in celebrating. Around the table, the other guests remained silent, unwilling witnesses to a reckoning none of them had anticipated. "I want to be very clear," Victoria said, addressing the Reynolds family directly. Mark Turner stopped on a busy highway to help a complete stranger. He worked for 2 hours in the heat, got dirty, used his own tools and his own parts, and refused to accept a single dollar in return. Her words hung in the air like a formal charge. "He made himself late for your gathering because he chose to help someone in need." She looked each of them in the eye. "And your response was to humiliate him for the kindness that brought me here at all." Her voice was calm but absolute. "That tells me everything I need to know about your character. And character, as I said earlier, is not optional when it comes to my investment decisions." Harold's hands were visibly shaking now. "Ms. Hale, please," he said, his voice unsteady, "if you could find it in your heart to reconsider." "Oh, I am considering quite a few things at the moment," Victoria replied calmly. and the tone of her voice made it clear that none of those considerations favored him. She placed her napkin on the table with deliberate precision, the kind of controlled movement made by someone accustomed to making decisions that altered the course of other people's lives. The dining room went completely still, broken only by the slow ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, marking time like a countdown to judgment. "I have reached my decision regarding Reynolds' construction," Victoria said evenly. The color drained from Harold's face, leaving him pale and hollow. "Miss Hale, please, if you would just—" "Allow me to finish," she said, her voice firm without being loud. The authority in it was unmistakable, forged in boardrooms and high-stakes negotiations. In my 30 years as a venture capital investor, I have learned that financial projections only tell part of the story. The most critical factor in any partnership is character. Her gaze moved slowly around the table, settling on each member of the Reynolds family in turn. Character reveals itself in how people treat others when they believe no one important is watching. It determines whether a business relationship can endure real pressure or collapse at the first sign of adversity. Stephen's wine glass trembled in his hand. "Character?" he echoed weakly. "Exactly," Victoria replied. "I do not invest in spreadsheets alone. I invest in people, and the people I support must demonstrate basic decency, integrity, and respect for others." Her tone remained professional, but there was steel beneath every word. "Those qualities are not negotiable." Caroline leaned forward, desperation breaking through her polished exterior. "Ms. Hale, surely you understand that we uphold certain standards." "Standards," Victoria repeated, her smile sharp and cold. "Yes, let us talk about standards." She folded her hands neatly on the table. "This afternoon, when my car broke down on the highway, I was helped by a man who gave 2 hours of his time, used his own tools and parts, and refused to accept a single dollar in return. That man demonstrated exactly the kind of character I look for in business partners." Harold's hand shook as he reached for his water glass. "We had no way of knowing—" "And that is precisely the point," Victoria interrupted smoothly. "You had no idea who Mark was in relation to me. So you showed your true selves. You told a man who sacrificed his afternoon to help a stranger that he was not fit to sit with human beings." Her words landed with the force of a hammer, though her voice never rose. "You demonstrated the kind of character I cannot support." The room felt like a courtroom awaiting a verdict. The other guests had stopped pretending to eat, their attention fixed on Victoria as she delivered judgment with quiet precision. "I require partners who understand that success depends on more than profit margins and market share," she continued. "It depends on treating people with dignity, regardless of appearance, profession, or social standing." Her eyes met mine briefly. The respect there was unmistakable. "Mark Turner embodies those values," she said. "You do not." Lauren's voice barely carried across the table. "What does this mean?" "It means," Victoria said clearly, "that I will not be investing in Reynolds Construction. I cannot, in good conscience, support a business led by people who lack basic human decency." The silence that followed was crushing. Harold's face shifted from pale to chalk white as the reality of what he was losing settled in. Caroline's carefully maintained composure cracked, revealing raw panic beneath the surface. "Please," Harold said hoarsely, "our expansion plans, the jobs we will create, the development for the community. You will need to secure funding elsewhere," Victoria replied, leaving no room for argument. I have seen enough tonight to know that any partnership between us would be fundamentally incompatible with my values." Stephen set his wine glass down with shaking hands. "But we did not know about your connection to him. And that is exactly why this decision is so clear," Victoria said coolly. "You treated Mark poorly because you believed it did not matter, because you assumed there would be no consequences for cruelty. That tells me everything I need to know about your judgment." Something loosened inside my chest then, a lightness I had not felt since Ellen passed away. It was not triumph. It was something quieter and deeper, the satisfaction of watching truth finally stand upright. Character is not something you switch on when the right people are watching, Victoria continued. It is who you are when you think it does not matter. Tonight, you showed me exactly who you are. Harold's carefully constructed empire, built on deals, reputation, and influence, collapsed in that elegant dining room with the efficiency of a controlled demolition. Decades of status-seeking undone by minutes of revealed character. "I hope," Victoria said as she rose gracefully from her chair, "that this experience teaches you something meaningful about how to treat other human beings, though I suspect the lesson will be a costly one." The birthday cake remained untouched on its crystal stand, 3 perfect layers of celebration no one had the stomach to enjoy. 10 minutes later, I stood in the foyer pulling my jacket from the closet while Victoria gathered her purse. The Reynolds home felt different now, still beautiful, but hollow, like a museum built over a collapse. Lauren stepped up beside me, her eyes red and swollen. "Dad, I am so sorry," she whispered. "I never wanted—" "I know," I said gently, pulling her into a hug. "None of this is your fault. You are caught in the middle of something you did not create." "What am I supposed to do now?" she asked. "Be yourself," I said softly. "That is all any of us can do." I kissed her forehead. "You are better than this. Do not let their bitterness change who you are." Victoria waited quietly by the door, steady and composed, a calm presence amid the emotional wreckage. When I finished speaking with Lauren, I turned to Victoria, surprising myself with my own courage. "Victoria," I said, "would you like to get some dinner? I know a place nearby that serves good food without requiring a trust fund." Her smile, warm and genuine, was the first I had seen all evening. "I would like that very much," she said, and just like that we walked out together, leaving behind everything that no longer mattered. We left the Reynolds house behind us, stepping into the cool May evening air. It felt like freedom after hours of social suffocation. The night was quiet, calm in a way that made breathing easier. My Toyota sat parked between 2 luxury vehicles, looking almost defiant in its simplicity, a reminder that authenticity still existed in a world obsessed with appearances. "Your car or mine?" Victoria asked, a hint of amusement in her eyes. "Mine is probably more reliable," I said with a small smile, thinking about the alternator repair that had started this entire chain of events. During the short drive to Miller's Steakhouse, a local place known for great food and zero pretension, we talked about everything except what had just happened. The weather, Central Ohio traffic, the way spring felt different when you had lived long enough to appreciate seasons instead of rushing through them. Miller's greeted us with warm lighting and the comfortable hum of real conversation. No crystal chandeliers, no forced laughter, just people enjoying honest meals. We slid into a corner booth where the red vinyl seats had been worn smooth by decades of shared dinners and quiet truths. "So," Victoria said after we ordered, settling back, This has been quite a day. That is one way to describe it, I said, lifting my water glass, still trying to absorb how completely the evening had turned. I woke up this morning, dreading a birthday dinner. Now I am sitting here with someone who flipped my entire perspective upside down. The universe has an odd sense of humor, she said. I have spent 30 years evaluating people for business partnerships. Usually that takes months of research, background checks, and financial analysis. Today, I learned everything I needed to know in 2 hours on the side of a highway. Our food arrived. Simple steaks, vegetables, nothing fancy. The kind of meal meant to satisfy rather than impress. We ate slowly, conversation flowing naturally, the ease between us surprising in the best way. "Can I ask you something?" I said, cutting into my steak. "Of course. Why does character matter so much to you when you make business decisions?" She paused, thinking as she chewed, because everything else can be taught or hired. Market knowledge, financial expertise, operational skill. You can bring in consultants for all of that. But integrity, the way someone treats others when they believe it does not matter. She shook her head gently. That is who people really are. And bad character eventually destroys everything else. The Reynolds family learned that lesson the hard way tonight. They will survive, Victoria said without bitterness. Harold will find other investors, just not on terms as favorable as mine would have been. Fran will recalibrate her social standing to match their new reality. Stephen will keep his job and maybe learn something about when silence becomes complicity. And my daughter? Your daughter will be fine, she said firmly. She has something the rest of them lack, genuine kindness, that carries people through far more than money ever will. We talked for nearly 2 hours, covering everything from business philosophy to family history to the small quiet pleasures that made life meaningful. Victoria told me about growing up with very little, about building her success through patience and judgment instead of shortcuts. She spoke of her marriage, 35 years with a man she loved deeply, lost to cancer, and the loneliness that wealth could not touch. Friendships become more valuable as we get older, she said, as we finished our coffee. Real ones, people who see who you are and value it. I would like to be that kind of friend, I said honestly. You already are, she replied. Walking out to the parking lot, I felt something I had not experienced since Ellen died. A quiet optimism about what lay ahead, not because of the justice I had witnessed, satisfying as it was, but because I had met someone who valued the same things I did. "Mark," Victoria said, stopping beside her Mercedes, "I want you to have my personal number, not the business line, my real one. Call me whenever you feel like talking to someone who values character more than appearances." I saved her number into my phone, right beneath my daughter's contact. "You do realize you will be hearing from me regularly," I said. "I am counting on it." Driving home through the quiet streets of Dublin, I reflected on the day's impossible journey, from roadside repair to public reckoning to genuine friendship. Ellen would have liked Victoria. 2 women who understood that kindness mattered more than status, that helping others was its own reward. My phone buzzed. A message from Victoria appeared on the screen. "Thank you for reminding me that good people still exist. I am looking forward to our friendship." I typed back, "Thank you for seeing something worth defending. Drive safely." When I unlocked my apartment door, the space felt different. Still small, still modest, but no longer empty. Tomorrow would bring new possibilities. Coffee with a friend who valued integrity. Conversations built on respect instead of judgment. Sometimes justice arrives wearing an elegant blazer and driving a luxury car. But it is powered by something far more valuable: the ability to recognize genuine human worth.